Ukraine turning its fire on the Russian-controlled city of Sevastopol. Targeting the Black Sea Fleet in an attack overnight on Crimea's biggest port.
Ukraine did not need to sink every ship in Sevastopol to change the war in the Black Sea. It only had to do something even more dangerous. It had to make Russia's most important naval port feel exposed, fragile, and constantly hunted. And that is exactly what this strike was about. According to Ukraine's security service, fighters from the SSU's Alpha Special Operations Center hit the Russian Black Sea Fleet's Project 775 large landing ships Yamal and Azov in occupied Crimea, along with another military ship of unidentified type. The same Ukrainian statement said the strike also likely destroyed a Project 21980 Grachanok anti-sabotage boat, while damaging a radar station, communications infrastructure, and an oil depot. Reuters also reported Ukrainian claims that 2 landing ships and another warship were damaged, while Russian-installed officials acknowledged drone attacks, widespread damage in Sevastopol, and a fire at a fuel tank. And that is the real story here. Not just that ships were hit, not just that explosions lit up Crimea again, but that Sevastopol, the crown jewel of Russia's Black Sea posture, keeps losing its most important quality: safety. A naval port is supposed to be where a fleet rests, repairs, reloads, refuels, and prepares for the next move. It is supposed to be the place where commanders can breathe. Ukraine is turning that place into the opposite: a home port that feels like a front line, a sanctuary that behaves like a trap. And once that happens, the damage goes far beyond steel plates and scorched fuel tanks. It starts to eat away at Russia's naval power itself. Ukraine did not erase the port from the map, but strategically, it is doing something almost worse for Moscow. It is erasing Sevastopol's usefulness one function at a time. One strike hits the ships, another hits the headquarters, another hits fuel, another hits air defenses, another forces dispersal, another pushes ships farther away, another makes every sailor, every officer, every logistician in Crimea understand that nowhere is really quiet anymore. By the end of this story, that is what matters, not whether every vessel sank, but whether the port can still do its job. And for Russia, that answer keeps getting uglier. Start with the ships. Yamal and Azov are Project 775 large landing ships, the kind of vessels that rarely get the glamour treatment in public discussion, but matter enormously in real war. These are not symbolic toys, they are workhorses. They move troops, vehicles, ammunition, supplies, and heavy cargo. In peacetime, they are useful transport assets. In wartime, especially in a contested theater like the Black Sea, they become instruments of flexibility. They let Russia move materiel quickly, reinforce positions, sustain operations, and maintain options. If those ships are damaged or even tied up in repairs, inspections, and emergency protection measures, Russia loses something militaries need badly in long wars: mobility. Not glamorous mobility, useful mobility. The boring kind that keeps campaigns alive. Logistics is never as cinematic as missiles in the night. It is also the reason one side is still functioning by the end of the month. Now, look at the full target list, because that is where this operation stops being a headline and starts looking like a system attack.
The latest reminder from Kyiv that it wants this war to end where it began, in Crimea. The 2 Russian warships that were damaged.
Ukraine says the strike did not only hit Yamal and Azov, it also reportedly damaged another military vessel, likely destroyed a Grachanok anti-sabotage boat, damaged the antenna block of the Delphin communications system, hit the MR-10M1 MIS-M1 radar station, and set fuel infrastructure at the Yug-Torsen oil depot ablaze. That is not target shopping, that is architecture, ships, harbor defense, radar coverage, communications, and fuel. In other words, the hulls, the shield, the eyes, the voice, and the blood supply. That is how you attack a port if your real objective is not just damage, but dysfunction. This is the moment the story gets bigger than any one vessel, because naval power is not just about what floats, it is about the network that lets floating things matter. A warship tied to a pier, without fuel, without trusted radar coverage, without secure communications, and without confidence in port protection, is still physically there, but its combat value starts to decay. And that is what Ukraine has been chasing in Crimea for a long time now. Not merely spectacular kills, though those matter. Not just political theater, though that matters too. Ukraine has been trying to make the Black Sea Fleet live under constant operational stress, repair slowly, move cautiously, burn fuel defensively, spend resources on survival instead of projection, treat every harbor routine like a risk. That is attrition in its modern form. You do not always remove the asset. Sometimes you remove its comfort, rhythm, and freedom to act. And the reason this matters so much is that Sevastopol is not just any port. It is the historical and operational center of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. In Russian political mythology, Crimea is supposed to symbolize permanence, power, return, strategic inevitability. Sevastopol in particular carries enormous emotional and military weight in the Russian narrative. So every successful strike there hits two layers at once. It damages capability and it humiliates the image of control. That second part matters a lot. Authoritarian systems survive partly on spectacle. They need key places to look untouchable. They need the map to feel settled. Ukraine keeps proving the opposite. Crimea is occupied, but not secured. Sevastopol is held, but not safe. And those are very different things.
To understand how important this is, you have to zoom out and look at the Black Sea War as a campaign, not as isolated incidents. In the old imagination of naval conflict, sea power was decided by giant battles. Fleets meeting fleets, missile volleys, clean, dramatic endings. That is not what the Black Sea has looked like. The war there has become a slow, adaptive contest of denial. Ukraine does not need a larger, conventional fleet to challenge Russia. It needs to make the sea, the coast, and the ports increasingly dangerous for Russian ships to use. That is what anti-ship missiles, special operations intelligence, unmanned surface vessels, air and drone strikes, and careful target selection have done over time. They have turned Russian naval presence from a symbol of dominance into an exercise in risk management. And the pattern matters. Reuters reported in March 2024 that Ukraine said it had already struck Yamal and Azov in an earlier attack on Crimea. AP reported that Ukrainian officials in that same period said another amphibious landing ship, Kostiantin Olshansky, and the intelligent ship Ivan Kurz were also hit, alongside port infrastructure and fuel facilities. So when the names Yamal and Azov appear again, that is not just another dramatic headline. It suggests a deeper truth. Russia has not restored security to the fleet's ecosystem. The same types of assets in the same strategic space remain vulnerable. That means the problem is structural. And that structural problem has already forced Russia to change behavior. Reuters reported in October 2024 that attacks had pushed many Black Sea Fleet warships away from Sevastopol, with Russian official Dmitry Rogozin openly saying large ships had become big targets for Ukrainian unmanned boats.
Which released this video on Saturday, showing the naval drones crashing into the tankers. Reuters could not independently verify the details of the video.
That phrase is brutally simple, and it captures the whole transformation. Big targets. Once, a large landing ship or a major combatant in Sevastopol represented mass, reach, and state power. Now, it also represents a concentrated radar signature, a fixed maintenance burden, a known mooring pattern, and an increasingly nervous command structure. In a constrained sea, under constant surveillance, large ships are not only useful assets, they are liabilities waiting to be found.
Big targets. That line deserves to hang over the entire Black Sea War. Because that is the revolution Ukraine has been forcing on Russia. A warship in a port used to be safer than a warship at sea. Now it may be easier to locate, easier to pattern, easier to attack through supporting infrastructure, and harder to protect without devoting major resources to layered defense. A naval base used to solve problems, now it can concentrate them. A fleet used to impose costs on the enemy, now the enemy can impose costs simply by keeping the fleet pinned, displaced, and worried. This is not the death of sea power, but it is a warning that sea power in enclosed waters looks very different when the defender has missiles, drones, intelligence, and the will to keep striking rear areas. That is also why hitting a Grachanok anti-sabotage boat matters. On paper, a Project 21,980 boat is tiny compared to a landing ship. It is not the kind of thing that dominates a thumbnail, but in this war, these protective layers matter more than people think. Grachanok boats exist to help secure naval bases against underwater infiltrators, saboteurs, and unconventional threats. In a theater where Russia increasingly fears unmanned attacks and covert penetration around harbor approaches, every protective asset matters. Lose enough of those, or force them into defensive overwork, and the port grows even more anxious. Harbor defense is one of those invisible military functions nobody notices until it fails. Then, suddenly, everyone notices at once.
Then there is the radar station. The MR-10M1 MIS-M1 is not headline material for a general audience, but for a military planner, the significance is obvious. Radar is awareness. Awareness is time. Time is survival. Damage the radar, and you do not just break hardware. You interfere with the defender's ability to see, interpret, and react. Every minute of delayed detection matters. Every patch in the picture matters. Every extra ounce of uncertainty matters. In a port already under repeated strike pressure, that uncertainty becomes poisonous. It means more false alarms, more wasted readiness, more tension, more strain on crews, and more opportunities for the next strike package to slip through or arrive faster than expected. The same goes for communications. The reported damage to the Delphin system matters because ports are command nodes. They are not just places where ships sit. Orders move through them. Coordinates, warnings, routing instructions, logistics priorities, repair statuses, harbor defense messages, and air defense alerts all rely on a functioning communications architecture. When those nodes are hit, you are not just damaging electronics, you are disrupting the rhythm of the force. Modern military systems are not defeated only by destroying platforms. They are degraded by fraying the links between them. It is death by interruption. Very modern, very efficient. Very bad for anybody trying to run a fleet under pressure. And then there is fuel. Fuel may be the least glamorous target in war, and one of the most important. Fuel means ships can sortie, vehicles can move, generators can run, repair operations can function, defensive systems can stay active. And fuel fires in a port are not just about the immediate blaze. They force emergency responses, redirect manpower, complicate movement, raise security alerts, and remind everyone in the area that even basic sustainment is now contested. When an oil depot burns, it sends a message stronger than a press release. Your rear is not rear. Your logistics are not private. Your supply chain is on the battlefield now.
This is where the land war and the naval war blur together. Crimea is not just a naval story, it is a logistical hub for Russia's military posture in southern Ukraine and the wider Black Sea region. Ports matter because supplies move through them, because command functions cluster there, because air defense and naval defense overlap there, and because they support both operational presence and political symbolism. That means every strike on Sevastopol has effects that ripple outward. It can affect repair schedules, fuel distribution, force protection requirements, movement patterns, even the broader distribution of Russian air defense assets around Crimea. If Russia has to keep hardening and defending Sevastopol at all costs, that means resources are being tied down there instead of elsewhere. That is how a strike on a port becomes a pressure point across a theater. It also matters for trade and for the wider Black Sea balance. AP reported in March 2024 that Ukrainian officials said about a third of Russian warships in the Black Sea had been destroyed or disabled since the full-scale invasion. Even allowing for wartime claims and the need for independent verification on specific incidents, the larger trend is obvious. Russia's freedom of action at sea has narrowed. Reuters reported in late 2023 that after Russia exited the grain deal, Ukraine managed to establish and operate a maritime corridor hugging the western Black Sea coast near Romania and Bulgaria, and merchant traffic began using it. That happened in part because Russia's fleet was no longer able to dominate the sea in the same way it once threatened to. These things connect. Pressure on the fleet creates room for Ukraine. Naval attrition becomes economic oxygen. That is the logistics. Now, here is the politics. Every time Sevastopol is hit, the Kremlin faces a narrative problem it cannot fully solve. If it downplays the damage, it risks looking dishonest when videos, fires, and local reports emerge. If it admits the damage, it confirms vulnerability in one of the most politically charged places under Russian control. If it promises security and then gets hit again, the promise starts to sound hollow. If it relocates ships, it may preserve assets, but it also concedes that the fleet's most famous home port is no longer dependable. None of those are good options. That is why repeated strikes matter more than any single one. They create a chronic credibility problem. Not an explosion of confidence, but a corrosion of it. And for Ukraine, that is gold. Because this campaign is not only about military attrition, it is about shaping perceptions, showing domestic audiences that occupied Crimea is not beyond reach, showing international partners that Russian power can be contested creatively, showing Russian forces that the expensive architecture of control they built in Crimea is not invulnerable, and showing naval planners everywhere that a smaller maritime power can fight asymmetrically and still alter the operational environment in a major way. That is one of the most important themes of this war. Ukraine has repeatedly demonstrated that it does not need symmetry to impose strategic pain. It needs precision, persistence, and imagination. There is also a hard lesson here for every navy watching, not just Russia's. Ports are no longer sanctuaries by default. In an age of commercial satellites, long-range strike systems, low-cost drones, and networked infrastructure, fixed military infrastructure is easier to study and stress than ever. Fuel depots can be mapped, radar emissions can be characterized, harbor movements can be observed, patterns can be learned, defensive routines can be tested. Then, one day, the enemy stops studying and starts arriving. Sevastopol is becoming a case study in exactly that kind of vulnerability. Not because Russia forgot how to build a port, but because the character of threat has changed faster than many fleets were willing to admit.
And the cost curve is ugly for the defender. A large landing ship, a radar network, protected communications infrastructure, and a naval fuel system represent enormous accumulated investment. They take time, money, training, skilled labor, spare parts, and secure operating space. The things used to threaten them do not always need to match that investment. A clever strike package, a drone, a missile, intelligence from multiple sources, or a combination of cheap and expensive systems can create outsized strategic effect. That asymmetry is corrosive. It means the defender must spend heavily just to maintain normality, while the attacker can spend selectively to keep normality out of reach. Once a port enters that cycle, its value steadily erodes. And that is why the phrase, Ukraine erased Russia's naval port, works as a strategic metaphor. Not because the piers vanished into the sea, not because every ship exploded in a single apocalyptic night, but because a naval port is more than concrete and water. Its real value lies in what it enables: confidence, concentration of force, sustainment, repair, and command. If those functions are repeatedly disrupted, degraded, or made dangerous, then the port still exists physically, while disappearing operationally. That is the kind of erasure militaries fear most. The map still looks the same, the usefulness does not. So what does this mean for Russia now? It means more resources diverted into defending Crimea, more pressure to disperse ships and equipment, more complicated logistics, longer maintenance chains, more layered air and harbor defense requirements, more nervous commanders, more symbolic embarrassment, more reasons to move assets farther from Sevastopol, even if doing so weakens presence and prestige. In military terms, this is called forcing the enemy into an unfavorable posture. In plain English, it means making their life harder every single day, even when you are not sinking anything that morning.
And what does it mean for Ukraine? It means a weaker Russian naval threat in the Black Sea, a more contested Crimea, and more leverage in the wider war. It means the possibility of preserving maritime corridors, reducing pressure on the coast, and keeping Russian forces guessing about what is safe. It also reinforces a lesson Ukraine has taught repeatedly. A smaller force that understands geography, logistics, and enemy psychology can make a larger force feel clumsy, overexposed, and expensive. That is not magic, it is good strategy. So no, Ukraine did not literally erase Russia's entire naval port in one night. But that misses the bigger point. It keeps erasing the promise Sevastopol was supposed to make. Bring your ships here, and they will be protected. Fuel them here, and they will be ready. Repair them here, and they will return stronger. Coordinate from here, and the system will hold. Ukraine keeps attacking each piece of that promise. And when that promise starts to fail, the fleet loses more than ships. It loses its home. That is the real significance of Yamal and Azov. Not just 2 landing ships reportedly damaged in Crimea, but another proof that Russia's Black Sea fleet is living inside a shrinking zone of safety. Another proof that Sevastopol is no longer the calm center of Russian naval power it once claimed to be. Another proof that in modern war, the most important victory is not always the one where something disappears in a fireball. Sometimes it is the slower, colder victory where an entire military system keeps functioning worse, sleeping worse, moving worse, and trusting less. A port does not have to sink to be broken. It just has to stop feeling like a refuge.
And in the Black Sea, that may be exactly what Ukraine is achieving.